Hi guys, Martin Curry from Belief Media. Welcome to the Belief Media podcast episode 9 titled Gravity. Now, we actually recorded this as a standalone video, didn't we?
Yeah, originally it was going to be part of the autoresponder sequence, and we then got carried away with how much content we were talking about. So
that's the video. Intent was the video we recorded was intended to be part of a digital marketing funnel, experience, email autoresponder campaign. Yeah, you're right. And it went for 2 hours, and we thought, hang on, we've got a podcast scheduled number 18 or 16, 18?
18, yeah.
18, which covered some of the gravity modules, and we've covered most of what we wanted to cover in what was meant to be a short video. No one's going to watch a 2-hour video on the tail end of an autoresponder email. So we said, let's make this our relationship-based podcast. So we switched a few things around, moved a few things on our system, and this is now going to introduce those some of those programs that are designed to attract organic audiences, develop business relationships, referrers, and so on. So they're relationship-based programs, essentially all of them. The most successful and the most powerful, again, in the industry. Now, we talk a lot about volumes in this podcast. When I went back through and just had a little bit of a listen to it, and we do make mention of it, we mention a few times, we say these figures, 100 million, 150 million, and we cringe a little bit. We know people are cringing as well. Going, how can you do that? That's not possible. So it's probably important to address that.
In hindsight, yes, and it's perfect that we're doing the intro again, so we can cover that point.
Well, it's the only intro. In the previous one, there wasn't an intro.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, I need to, in my first year back in the mortgage industry, I took a break off. I went and flew Boeing 777s with Virgin for, a bunch of years, and the 737 and stuff as an airline pilot. It was something I enjoyed doing, so I went and did it and took a break essentially from the nuts and bolts of running my own mortgage broker business. I was running Belief Media, and before that I was trading under my mortgage broker brand iChoice as a digital marketer. In fact, we traded under that name for Woolies and IGA and Qantas, a whole bunch of different brands around the country, which was strange because it was a mortgage broking brand. However, when I came back, it was 18 months later, after reintroducing myself to the business, where it was up at 500 million. I think a lot of that was with only 3 brokers. I think a lot of that was because I wasn't limited by personal bias and certainly industry bias, and that poisonous attitude that plagues the industry. I've always said to brokers, I think the worst thing a broker can do is gravitate towards those BS Facebook platforms and Facebook groups, and there's a bunch of them. Finance and coffee. We talked about it a little while ago. I think that normalizes mediocrity. I think that's a really dangerous place to invest any of your time, because you start to believe that what people are saying is true. People whinge and complain and carry on like pork chops. No, don't associate yourself with that level of company. Go and join a group where you're dealing with elitists, people that are doing a couple of $100 million a year in personal volume. It was in the Digital Finance Guide, and we'll talk more about volume in a moment, but in the Digital Finance Guide, we have a section there on the 4-minute mile. May 6th, 1954, Roger Bannister broke 3 minutes 59 seconds, 0.4, I think it was. Until then, people thought the 4-minute mile was impossible, just couldn't be done. Like a whole lot of things, people always believe something can't be done until it has been done. So it's impossible until it's not. 46 days later, John Landy, an Australian guy, 3 minutes 58 seconds. Now 1,400 athletes plus. It's probably 1,500 or 1,600 now. 1 year later, 3 runners broke the 4-minute mile in a single race. All we needed to do is for one person to prove it was possible for everybody else to catch up. So nothing is impossible. So I've got a few quotes here. Okay, I want you to tell me who said them. Okay, nuclear energy will never be attainable.
That was Albert Einstein.
How do you know that? Have you read that section in the manual? Or did you just know that?
No, that one I knew.
Albert Einstein, 29 December 1934. That was Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Sorry, what did you say when you talked?
Also being related to nuclear gave it a bit of a hint.
Yeah, okay. No flying machine will ever fly from New York to Paris. Orville Wright.
Yeah, the one who invented the actual airplane, yeah.
Well, he took credit for inventing the aircraft. There are a number of people that invented, even powered aircraft before Wilbur and Orville Wright, but they never assigned the appropriate credit. That was in 1920.
Actually, I spoke to one of them who's talked about his father in New Zealand, having flown a powered airplane before that. That's another podcast we can talk about.
Yeah, there's a number of cases, potentially, of people having experienced powered flight in Australia, largely undocumented. I had to go into the State Library of New South Wales in order to find the appropriate material because it's not published on their digital archive. And there's records there dating back to 1879. 1879. And then there's another one in 1897, I think. I've got some records, and I've been meaning to publish this stuff for a long, long, long time. But there were guys that have recorded powered flight in France and Germany, all over the world. But the Americans kind of ignore anything that doesn't happen within their own borders. So as far as they were concerned, and back in the day, news was it was difficult for news to propagate worldwide. So as far as the Americans were concerned, that was it anyhow. Unfortunately, though, despite the fact that news is global, they have not changed, have they? Impossible is a word to be found in the dictionary of fools. We often say extraordinary is the opposite of what everyone else is doing. That's actually a Seth Godin quote. We say it all the time. Now, it's not just what a business does that contributes to that. It's how it thinks. So $100 million seems to be this figure that people throw around in the industry, and it seems to be a benchmark for different type of people to assess performance. It's a whole lot of bullshit, and it's an arbitrary value that means absolutely nothing. Now, I personally believe it's only a matter of time before that value is just doesn't exist. The arbitrary value for a broker that does well might be 300 million instead. We're just going to have to progressively raise the bar, and that's going to happen faster and faster because technology is evolving at a point where it can support your business. Now, at the same time, the compliance requirements are evolving. So we have to develop the technology to support the compliance requirements. But in all our programs, we routinely see guys write $130 million. We like at that point, it varies depending on the person, but we like people to write up to 130 as a sole trader, but consider putting someone on between $80 and $100 million because that places them in a position where they can take advantage of a number of these relationship programs we're about to discuss, notably Saturn. But you can easily do $130 million as an individual. That is not hard. For most people, in certainly the east coast of Australia, it becomes more challenging to achieve that in rural Australia, where property prices aren't quite where they are, certainly in Sydney. And, other parts of Sydney, it becomes more difficult, even in southeast Queensland, where property prices can be half of what they are here. You can buy house and land in southeast Queensland for $500,000. You just cannot. You can't buy a block of land in Sydney for $500,000. You're looking at $550,000, and the build on top of that becomes ridiculous. So brokers in Sydney, essentially to achieve the same volume, only have to work half as hard. Now, we're going to introduce, again, we ran this when we did $2.3 billion as a business. We talk about that throughout the podcast we're about to play for you. But we're about to introduce a program all over again. We spoke about this afternoon, just to clarify, but we're going to live stream ourselves in the office here over specific days where we will write 10 million for a business. Well, we won't write 10 million for a business, but we'll attract up to $10 million worth of business for a business because it's not difficult to do. Now, I read an ad on Facebook last night about this BS coaching program. I don't like coaching programs. I think people need a marketing department in order to provide them with the technology and assistance and guidance, the expertise, rather than some guy telling them what to do, sort of with a whip that doesn't work. I don't like coaching programs. He was talking about cracking the code and brought up the MFAA, one of the MFAA intelligence reports from 2019 and so on. And he said, I cracked the code for 100 million. No, you didn't. No, it's predictable. It's not difficult. It's easy, in fact. And I know people cringe again when I say that, but it's not hard. All you need is the necessary tools in order to achieve that. Now, Gravity Program provides those tools. We're telling you straight out, if you, with or without us, if you apply the practices and put them sort of in SOPs and make the apply the principles that we're about to talk about throughout the next 2 hours or so, it's a long podcast, into your own business with or without us. The only advantage with us is it comes with our support and the software necessary to achieve it and automate it. But you can achieve it via other means. This is, you can support relationship-based programs in any number of ways. If you do what we're going to talk about in the next 2 hours, you will do at least $100 million over the next 12 months. Now, a lot of people will not. Do you remember that story I told you about one of the database clearing programs? I went out to North Ryde somewhere and sat down with 2 guys and said, run through your databases, get through this database. I made the first bunch of calls for them and made a few bookings and called the fellow the next day. How many calls did you get through? He said, 3 or 4. It just didn't. Some people will encounter all sorts of psychological barriers that will prevent them from doing anything that doesn't come in organically. They're waiting for the phone to ring. We talk about one of our guys in Western Sydney here that is refinancing shopping centres and big developments in Leppington, which is for a new shopping district and so on. He's writing homes, more homes in the eastern suburbs than guys in the eastern suburbs are writing, through those connections he has with these people that run these excavation companies and development companies and things like. He's doing extremely well. And I believe he will be the top broker in Australia within 12 to 18 months without question. The problem is he doesn't write the volume himself. He spreads it out amongst a bunch of group of people. And the broking industry doesn't support that. It doesn't really support business volume. It doesn't care about that. It's looking at the individual volume of broken, which is flawed anyhow. A lot of the time you've got a broker with a bunch of people doing the work for him, so he inherits the glory and doesn't put any of the effort in. So the point is that these relationship programs will change your life if you let them change your life. But you have to have the initiative. You have to be enthusiastic. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. And if you do this, I'm telling you straight out, you can go out and achieve a measure of success. Now, broking is predictable. This is the other thing. The last thing I want to say, broking is absolutely predictable like any kind of business, right? The reason McDonald's does well, the old Speedy system, is because they identified a set of SOPs, practices, procedures. They identified designs and so on that worked. So you can take a McDonald's restaurant and put it anywhere in the world and you're almost assured of a measure of success. A lot of that has to do with the nature of the brand and people being attracted to what they know and like and trust, all that sort of stuff. But in essence, each McDonald's can be set up and run in a day to the same standard as a restaurant that's been running for 20 years. So you can take and that's why people like mortgage broker franchises, is that they can do that. It doesn't always work in the franchise in the franchise world because broking franchises are actually really quite poor. And the lead generation that is promised by way of a lot of these franchises does not exist. We can generate more leads in a day than any franchise office would get in a month. And it's super easy to do. We've got better relationship programs from franchises because franchises take too much of a helicopter or holistic view. They stand back from it all because they aren't able to apply that personalisation, and brokers often do not, because the franchises don't push those sorts of programs upon them, or at least require that of them as part of being part of that franchise. But that a franchise group is as close as you get to McDonald's. So out of anybody in the industry that supports the broking industry, via digital means or even coaching programs, Belief Media is the only company that can say we have cracked the code. We are the only company that can say we have a blueprint for success, and for fuck's sake, it just works. You know, it is easy. We're seeing brokers do it over and over and over again. We just want brokers to do well. We're sick of the BS in the industry. We're sick of these arbitrary and ridiculous values and volumes that have been applied to what is considered success. And just going back to that industry report, I really don't like that report. I'll have to break it apart for you, and we might have to go through it another time. Of all the brokers in Australia, let's say there's 18,000 brokers in Australia, and let's say, less than half are writing. I'm not even going to go into volumes because it's not important. But you have to assume out of 18,000 brokers in the country, and there's a little bit less than that, that are active right now, a small portion of them, a large portion of them, broking is their second job. They kind of drag the averages down. Now, I know, I mentioned a teacher either in a podcast last night or video something. This teacher is doing $10 million a month on top of her teaching income, but she refuses to give up a teaching job. $10 million a month, that's $120 a year on top of a full-time job. Now, most brokers are just, that's a pipe dream. They're writing $25, $35 million a year and they're complaining about how busy they are. And for many brokers, I appreciate that. We've got a couple of guys we feed up to 120 leads a month to, and not all of those will convert straight away, but it creates this enormous workload in terms of contacting them. They're all ready to go clients. They are all ready to go clients, but there's a delay applied to every single one of them because a lot of them are first-time buyers. They're not going to buy right now. So this podcast really is about introducing the only blueprint for success in this industry. We're going to show you the programs that are the bread and butter. We're not going to introduce our high-tier platinum-based programs. We just can't. But we're going to introduce those programs that will give you $120, $150 million a year without question. There is just... And keep in mind, we're not trying to sell you on anything. Right? We're a software-based business now. We had a broker growth program that ran for a number of years. Every single one of our brokers that applied every element of the program, that's important, every element of the program easily cracked $100 million a year. Because we told them, this is the blueprint for success. Let's go through it. You have to tick all those boxes. You get from A to Z. You tick all those boxes. You're going to have 120 million worth of volume in 12 months. It's easy. If you miss, the two here and two here and two here and two here and so on, you can't expect the same level of success. There's no code to crack. It was never a puzzle. All right? It's straightforward. We want to help brokers. We just provide software systems to enable that. So we're not charging tens of thousands of dollars for this ridiculous, coaching program or something, which I see out in the industry. We're not promising, we're not trying to sell you on some ridiculous non-compliant Facebook program that's going to generate a little bit of volume to your business every month. We're giving you a very big, broad software system that enables you to achieve and facilitates the success that I've just talked about. We don't give a crap what measure of success you want. Our software will help you do it, but you don't need our software. You get it? So we're going to give you all the answers. From this point on, in Belief Media's future, we're going to give you all the answers.
Especially this podcast, it's probably one of the most important you can watch and one of the most business-changing impact ones.
We're going to come back because we recorded this yesterday. We recorded this yesterday and we honestly expected it to go for 10 minutes and it went for 2 hours or thereabouts, an hour 40, 2 hours or something. So we're going to come back after that 2 hours and just talk for another 15 minutes because there are 2 or 3 things that I would have liked to have introduced during the Edge module of that, which is our post-settlement program module. There are a couple of components of that I would have liked to have talked about, but did not, because I kind of in my head hadn't, was thinking that it wasn't the more comprehensive podcast. So we will come back and talk about just a few little bits and pieces that are really, really necessary, by the way. They're actually kind of essential components of that program that I just kind of skipped over. But we will talk about those now. Unfortunately, they're going to be like the 2 hour and 10-minute mark or something. So we'll just morph now into the podcast that we recorded yesterday.
And we'll chat again towards the end.
See you on the flip. You mentioned to me the other night, we're looking or hoping to do a podcast with one of the top salespeople with an insurance agency that is global. We won't mention the names or anything like that, but and I couldn't believe when I heard it said that the top salesperson globally, because this is a massive company that is in no way highly represented in Australia. It's certainly here. It's got a presence. Everyone knows their brand and their name, but overseas it's very significant.
Pretty large, and it was selling life insurance, and it was a lady, and she was the top salesperson internationally for that company. Here in Sydney. So hopefully have a chat to her and see if she would like to come along and have a chat to us. Her knowledge would be incredible with the relationships. And so.
It's a forgotten art. The ability to sell something to someone, the ability to forge a quick relationship with someone and find common ground and convert them into something within a short period of time is becoming more and more difficult because people have just completely and utterly forgotten the art of talking to people.
And in this case, listening.
Yeah. What'd you say?
Listening. I remember her actually saying, I got me.
I'm surprised.
It's just late at night.
Yeah, look, we're going to talk about a bunch of, despite the fact we're a very digital company, clearly been doing it for since 1997. We're very digitally focused. However, I started up a mortgage brokerage in 2004. It really wasn't about 2015 because I was working with Virgin Australia. I was very focused on aviation, and that time period I'd also been off and worked with the police force and all sorts of things. Like I took a big chunk out of my life and went and did a bunch of different things, despite the fact that this business was, churning over slowly. But the management at that time was in no way, good. There's a simple word. It was actually quite poor. The management was very poor. So I came in and introduced a number of systems back into the business that I found and started and owned and was very keen to see it do well. And within a short time, the volumes reached about $500+ million a year. That was on the back of nothing but relationship-based marketing, nothing. There were little digital programs we introduced here and there, but certainly, despite the fact at the time through our business, I think we were trading as Belief Media at the time, but we also had Y at the time. Despite the fact that we were introducing all these programs into Australia, all these Facebook programs and Google programs and YouTube advertising was absolutely massive back then because it was so cheap. Right, so we're introducing all these programs. Despite that, I didn't really introduce them into my own business. In fact, it was an easy choice. I'm just trying to remember the name of the company. It was absorbed by another brand, and they did in a year just under $1 billion. Those in the industry will remember that. 950 million of that came from Google AdWords. There were a lot of digital was being invested because it was so cheap. No one else was doing it. It was probably about 2015 or so when the Facebook brigade started to emerge and present themselves. And since then, we've seen the quality of obviously digital marketing decrease by probably 100-fold. Nothing's compliant anymore. And we've also seen the cost of leads go up. That's not by virtue of the shitty representation necessarily. That is a byproduct of that because their programs are so poor, but it's also because more and more businesses are getting into the market and bidding for and competing for various keywords and positions and audiences and so on. So it is becoming more difficult. But that business was built, my business, iChoice, was built on the back of nothing but relationship relationship-based marketing. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the relationship-based programs we have in place and the fact that we advocate for relationships above technology in the first instance. Certainly in our former growth program, when people came to us, what was the first thing we did?
Sit down and ask some questions about the number of loans they've written, their processes, their procedures. It's all on what they're doing right now. And
actually,
their database. And
yeah. Well, the database was sort of 5 or 6 questions in a questionnaire. I used to ask people a standard questionnaire. Every single broker that walked through the door answered exactly the same questions, and that way we were able to compare everybody against each other. So we were able to identify exactly how, what type of person we're attracting to the business. And in the end, there was no answer to that because they one day you'd have a franchise worth a few $1 billion come in, and the next day you'd have a guy who'd written $8 million a year before. So it was very, very broad. I guess most people were sole traders and had a volume that was less than triple digits. But everybody that came to us, I can give you stats on these because we do have these recorded. In fact, I'll come back to them. But yeah, we would ask every single question that we felt necessary in order to paint a picture, or at least give us an indication of how successful they were in, first of all, understanding their business. If they didn't know their numbers, we had bigger problems and we had to sort of get those and work through some other issues. You were here the other day. We did one of these questionnaires like a week and a half ago, didn't we? 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it's actually surprising how many people don't know the basic foundational KPIs or even the amount they're writing on average and size loans.
People are concerned about paying their mortgage this month. They're not concerned about how many employees they're going to put on in 2 years, which is kind of how we approach it. So we go through these questions, and it really depends on whether someone has a shop front, whether they're a sole trader, whether they're a mobile mortgage lender. All these different things apply. The questions are essentially the same, but some of them are just essentially nullified and wiped away. We want to know everything from how many phone calls do you get per day, per week. We want it broken down by hour. We want to know how many people walk through the door if you've got a franchise, how many you convert, your average loan size, the average age of everybody that comes through, the marital status, the number of kids, the postcode of the home, how many. We want to know everything. And I think in the first instance that illustrates very, very clearly, the fact that people are coming to us in the first place means their volumes are not where they should be. If people know all this data on the periphery, they're less likely to want us because if they understand that data, they're probably in a position to improve upon their presence. Now, that's not necessarily true. People come to us because even if their marketing is fantastic, they still need to take it to another level, and our systems obviously provide that. So if someone comes to us and they're doing $200 million a year as a sole broker with one employee, we'll take them to 350 very, very easily. It's really easy, I think, to get someone from 200 to 400. It's more challenging to get someone from... It's easy to get someone from 20 to 120. It's why we've got the Platinum program where we guarantee that. But it's very difficult to get someone from 120 to 200. That's the dead man's curve. Because it requires that first step into staffing, and it requires brokers take a step back from the daily role and relegate or delegate responsibilities to other team members. Don't know where we're going with all of that, but certainly relationship-based stuff is at the core of our business. We are a relationship-based business. The last ad we put on Facebook was maybe a couple of years ago. I don't even remember. We don't need to. We get more inquiries every single day than we need, and we only take on, or historically, this is with the growth program, we only took on a certain number of clients. Now, the same will apply with our digital marketing and social media platform. We're only going to allow a certain number of people to register. It's why we've got the pre-release. Once we hit the pre-release, we don't know how long it'll be before we release it out to the open market. Or, here's the thing, even if we do. And the reason for that is because we are in talks with aggregators. If an aggregator comes on board, then we are obligated to service and support them above anybody else, and increasing variables into the mix might prove problematic. But we're going to talk about a number of relationship-based programs: Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, Edge. Just 4. We might talk about NPS as well. In fact, we will talk about the NPS survey as well. So that's 5 systems. 2 of them are very similar. One is our highest performing program in our history. We kept it under lock and key. It was protected by an NDA until we released this book. It's the first time we ever published details on Saturn. Routinely returns about $400 million, up to $400 million a month for our brokers. $400 million for our aggregated brokers. That's more than most people were doing Facebook marketing in a year. So if you had a digital marketing agency that serviced mortgage brokers, they would do less than 400 in a year, guaranteed. Now, there's also Edge. Edge, in its previous iteration, did $9 billion. That's with a B. It could be attributed for generating $9 billion worth in volume, and now it routinely returns around $300 million a month as part of, that's not direct volume from us, that's just the system makes that the building the relationship easy, and we see the volume being built on the back of the effort that our system applies. Does that make sense?
Yes, so far.
Yeah. Dom's staring at me with a very blank face. He was asleep on this couch 3 minutes before we hit the record button. I screamed out his name from the other side of the office, and his head flung forward, and I think he came close to breaking something, actually, didn't you? He said, "Oh, no, my neck."
Got a kink in the neck.
Yeah, kink in the neck. So, do you want to talk about Jupiter and Pluto, or should I introduce it with reference to the growth program? I mentioned in a video the other day, I don't remember what it was, and I was saying that on day one, I'd ask for a video of our brokers, right, on day one, and I'd say, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what it looks like, all I want you to do is just jump in front of the video and talk about any subject you like, make it for 5 minutes. And there's only one guy in the company's history that has done anything that comes close to actually producing something that is amazing. Most people did nothing. That's the thing, 99.9% of people didn't even, I'd ask them 5 times. That was my rule. So I had a system there. I had to ask them for that video 5 times. If they didn't ask for that video 5 times, I wouldn't. If I had to ask them and they didn't give it to me, and then we wouldn't pass them on to the next. We wouldn't put them on a relationship program. We'd defer it by 8 weeks because we needed to know that people were capable of sort of task management. And that was only, we had to implement these ridiculous rules, and they were ridiculous only because we had so much to manage. So we had to pass the work on that we did get through to the appropriate people. Now, the second thing I did, there were 3 things actually. I'll come to talk about how NPS and Jupiter overlap, but the Pluto is a database clearing program, not your customer database. This is a personal database clearing program. Pull out your mobile phone and stop falling asleep.
What am I looking for?
Pull out your contacts. How many contacts are there?
Doesn't actually say, but
have a
200?
guess. 200. You haven't synced LinkedIn and Facebook and all that sort of stuff. I made the mistake a long time ago.
No, I kept them all separate.
Yeah, I wish I had have done that actually. But most people do sync up LinkedIn and their Microsoft contact folders, which I've done, and
that goes up
and
to thousands.
Facebook. Yeah, so I've got thousands and
Yeah.
thousands. I don't know half the people in my contact list. I really don't. But what that has done is it's provided, if I were a broker, it would have provided the opportunity through my personal database. That is a database. The fact that they're not customers is largely irrelevant. The fact that there are people that are family and friends. If we look at the gravity framework that we have in the mortgage marketing manual, there are a whole bunch of entry points into our relationship-based programs or our digital programs, because the entry point, is doesn't really matter where it is. So we make the mention there that we make the note there that there's a cost associated with each lead. Obviously, there's a heat. In fact, every lead has an associated cost and various complexities or varying degree and difficulty in order to convert that into a client. Now, that complexity and that cost and so on all goes out the window when we're talking about family and friends. First of all, family never want to deal with you. Right? But any broker will tell you, oh, I want to separate church and state. Why would you want to separate church and state? Why would you want to keep, let some other mortgage broker write a loan for your sister or your brother or something like that? I hear that all the time. A lot of brokers wouldn't even understand that concept, but I do hear it all the time.
Yeah, they find it a lot easier, actually a lot of people do, a lot easier to go and work with strangers than anyone on their phone, be companies they've worked with or someone they've emailed or chatted to.
Why is that?
It's a good question. Comes back to a lot of judgment. When you're working with family, some of the times they want to keep their own personal stuff separate, especially if you're dealing with cousins and all that. Everyone's trying to keep their personal wealth separate. Sometimes friends want to keep personal wealth separate and hidden and that.
Because they're embarrassed about their income. They don't want to provide their financials to someone that they actually know.
Keeping up the Jones syndrome also in Australia. So people are doing too well. They're worried that their friends might judge them as being too good or going too well, or also not going well enough.
No. If people are making too much, they want to show off.
Not always. No, not always. Sometimes they're worried that their friends might start asking too many favours. You get so many variations, and it just comes back to the people you surround yourself with.
All right, but the point is, the number of brokers that didn't. It's easier to. I can count on one hand almost the number of people that allowed a Jupiter program to take place, and that is download the database off your smartphone and go through every single one of them. That is very old school, right? That's dating back to Amway style shit, right? That's what Amway would get you to do.
And AMP.
I
remember there. A friend of mine joined up with the life insurance, income protection, all those insurances, and the first thing they get them to do is call the family and friends. And the ones that did kicked off really strong and well, and they used the same comment that you did. Why would you let your friends go and get looked after by a stranger than someone who has probably their interest more at heart?
Do you think if you asked if I called up one of my close friends, if I was a mortgage broker, and I said, look, I want to make sure you've been looked after. I really want to make sure you're in the best product and make sure you're looked after financially. I'm completely non-judgmental. I'm very professional. Everything will be, et cetera, et cetera. Let's do this. I'm coming over. Let's do it. And with most, close friends, you can do that. You can say, I'm coming over. I'm not going to take no for an answer.
They're going to be more receptive than what you realise.
They're incredibly receptive. It's
they'll grill you to make sure they got the best thing, which is great.
Yeah. And I remember that with AMP. I remember tagging along with one of my brokers about 20 years ago. They wouldn't do this anymore, but it was to an AMP seminar. That was in Sydney, an AMP building in Sydney. And I sat down there and as his employee within his broking company and sat down and listened to what was going on. And Amway do exactly the same thing. When Amway distributors who sell like soap and washing detergent and stuff. And I remember you had a little bit to do with Amway in you at least use their products. You used to buy it off someone or something, I don't remember. And the very first thing they'll do is they'll have you write down a list of everyone you know, and they'll start from the top. Sometimes, depending upon who the upline management people are, they'll have you get out a highlighter and go family in yellow and best friends in pink and these people in otherwise, and then they'll prioritise based on those. And then you go through and you call those people because they're the people that you're going to suck into your little pyramid program, aren't they?
Goes back to the trust.
Yeah, it goes back to the trust. And they don't ever want you to mention Amway in the phone call because they say, don't mention Amway. And I've sat in on enough of these meetings to understand exactly how they work. But they'll say, don't mention Amway in the meeting. Say you've got a business idea, you want them to come in and sit down. And a lot of people on the other end of the phone have been through this before. So when these people are making the phone calls, they say, it's not Amway, is it? And the funny thing is, none of my friends, no one I know has ever called me to an Amway meeting. Ever, except for once, and that was Paul, back I was 18 when he called me for that. And he got sucked in by another guy. But and I'm not saying sucked in, like I'm not judging Amway. It's just an unusual business concept, that's all. So if any of you are Amway distributors, I'm not being judgy at all. Just a little bit. No, Amway products are great. They really are good. They're, you know, they're better quality than most stuff you'll buy from Coles and Woolies, and they're very concentrated. So you use a very small amount. And they've got this little thing you measure out and you tip it in. It's like a thimble almost. It's just tiny. And the products are great. So Amway's on a good ticket, but their distribution network is possibly flawed in some respects, in that they have this.
The reputation's gone into a lot of distrust.
It's enormous. It's one of the most distrusted brands in the world. But the fact they had you go through this list and then invite people, and I often wonder, because I know friends of mine,
the process was correct.
The process works. Amway wouldn't be worth, it wouldn't be one of the biggest companies in the world, the biggest brands in the world at the moment, because that's where it all starts for anybody, is that list. And that has resulted, that and the huge number of distributors they have all going all at once. And then they have the attrition or retention. They know that certain number of people will do this and certain number of people will do that. Their business is so predictable. Their model is amazing, actually, in that respect. It's just that people get attracted to that business, and Amway, or at least those upline people, those people at a certain level, like direct distributor, I think is the name, and then certainly, towards the diamond level and things like that, they're aware that certain people will fail. But what they're doing is looking at getting that business volume, the personal volume, I think they call it, or business volume, one of the two, and they're trying to get that volume through that individual, because that if they have enough of those people come through every month, even if they drop off, it still adds to their total volume. It's just such a strange system. That's Amway. Fascinating. We should do a podcast on Amway. I was fascinated by it once. I pulled up all the Scamway websites and things like that, because I was just fascinated. From a business perspective, I was looking at a model for mortgage brokers, which was a network-related distribution. I ran it for about 6 months in the beginning of 2016. I ran it for 6 months, a network-related distribution system for mortgage brokers. And had I stuck with it, it would have worked, and it did work. There's no question about it. But it was hard work, right? No one was particularly invested in the end, like the people that were within that network distribution model. And we had lawyers all over this and everything, because we were so concerned about non-compliance and things like that. But the people within that model weren't allowed to provide any advice, weren't allowed to do this or that or anything else. So you had to have a mortgage broker come in and talk to people, and it became more of an investing club than anything else. But as part of that, they get a kickback on the basis of loans that were written. They'll pass through to groups, and they could build up a little kitty for the purpose of investing as a group. It was a bizarre model. It could have worked, it would have worked, but it's not the preferred model. Obviously, individual brokers and the model that exists now is the best model. And trust me, I've been through them all, I've seen them all, but that was something we looked at. That was with one of the biggest franchises in Australia. I did that for.
And the numbers part of that is interesting, that comment there, because if you go through and you do the work, there is certain numbers where people drop off, but it does become a bit of a numbers game with the referrals, and then your persona, the way you present it, and the trust you build up increases the success of conversions with the referrals.
So let's go back to this list, the Pluto list, and it's discussed in the Finance Marketing Guide at some point. If you're not going to go through that yourself, all right, there are people there that I worked with at Virgin Australia. A lot of the people I worked with when I was doing a lot of marketing stuff for Qantas in the day, there's a lot of Qantas, but there's a lot of law enforcement related people and things like that I didn't really know that well back then. I know their name now, but nothing else. And all these friends on LinkedIn and Facebook that sing, I don't know who they are. I look at them, I wouldn't have a clue. That's just the nature of contacts. I hate the way contacts does that. I really do. But it does provide brokers with a facility. If they want to kickstart their operation, that's the program in which to get it started. Now, you can download that and have somebody else do it for you. You don't have to call these people. We don't want you calling those people. We don't want you calling your family, your friends, or co-workers, or anyone else for that matter. We want someone else doing it, because if someone else does it, they're your employee, they're assigning value to your service. You don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to play yourself up. They can. Talk yourself up. They can. So the nature of the phone call is real simple. Hi, my name is Martin Curry. I work for Domenico Bourdil at XYZ Finance. How are you? I'm just clearing his personal database. I can't see a record of when you've last spoken to him. As you appreciate, he's a financial guru. He's looking at, I was hoping he could help you with the home loan. There's a lot of things. You're not going to say that because you sound like a knucklehead. But you provide some sort of commentary that will get you over the line. Now, depending on who it is, you can alter that style of communication. You can moderate yourself. But you inject yourself. That if anything else, the conversion rate on that, by the way, is nearly 100%. Do you know why? Okay, no, it's not a conversion rate that you're thinking of. It's a conversion rate. If they turn around, a lot of them, I've listened to these calls. When I do training, I listen to them all the time. If we're running a program on behalf of someone, which is really for platinum guys only in isolation. But if I'm doing training, I'll sit next to a guy and listen to these calls with my headset, and they'll often jump in and say, it's been ages since I've spoken to him. How is he? How's he doing? What's he up to now? Is he still working here or there? And that conversation starts something. If they get along with the person on the other end of the phone, that's fine. We always tell people, if people want to chat away. If they want to talk for 20 minutes about the weather, go along with it, And the point is, it converts in some way, because at the end, you always say, look, that's fine. If they're not interested, you go, that's fine. Is it okay if I send you an email? Just so you've got his details on record. Just so...
that's what you meant by the conversion.
That's the conversion we're looking for. We have to aim for that as a kind of average standard. If every now and again you've probably got ex-girlfriends in there and stuff that, if you're a fella, or maybe if you're a girl, I don't know, but they're going to hang up on you. They're not going to be really impressed by the phone call. So they'll just hang up on you. For those people, you just remove them from the database. Right? But for others, we're just saying, look, that's fine. Do you mind if I pop you into his... if I send you some information? But when you send them that information, you're doing so via the platform. So you're entering their name and email. What does that do? That sends them a text message, perhaps. Thanks for the call. Here's his information. Here's a VCF card, which is a card they can import into their mobile phone, or VXF. Doesn't matter.
VCF,
VCF, yeah. And it'll pop them and send them an email. You can always ask for that if you don't already have it. And pop them into a potential introducer email-based list. It's not going to be a silly list that's going to introduce them to first-home buyers or anything else, but these people are all investors. They're all homeowners. It's a really high-value group of people. It really, really is. And it's really easy to develop those. And once you develop those people, because they're easy, there's PWA happening there, they're already on top of mind. So when it does come time for someone when it does come time for them to engage the services of broker, if you maintain the contact and, a few text messages every now and again, all those sorts of things, which is part of the Pluto program. It's not just one point of contact and screw them, screw the bastards. You actually follow up on them. So they're easy to convert. They really are easy to convert.
And there will be a significant number which haven't had their loans reviewed in many years.
6.4%. 6.4% of everyone you call on that list will get a loan written. On average, 6.4. It can be higher for smaller lists. Yours would be higher. Mine would be low because there's I've basically got the population of New South Wales and Victoria combined on there. There's so many people, and I don't know any of them. If I have to scroll through to someone that I know, and I've kind of forgotten their name, it'll take me 3 minutes to flick through because it's hard as hell. But anyway, that's the point. That's Pluto. Pluto is a clearing exercise for that matter. I don't know if that made sense. Why name Pluto? Because it's a small, dense planet with not much gravity. Not much gravity. That's the point. By the way, all these programs are named after planets, usually associated with the gravity associated with that particular planet, which is normally more often associated with the size. Actually, not the size, but the mass. but they're usually proportional anyhow, aren't they?
Yes.
Except for Saturn.
And distance.
Distance from...
Diameters of the planets.
there's a number of factors, but this is, a silly name we're assigning to a program. But they are good. I like the name. Everything has to have a purpose. It's like our Venus program that he's designed. It's very specifically for a purpose. People say, why is it named Venus? Yeah, that's why. So moving on to Jupiter. Jupiter is our most successful program, guys, that we've ever run internally. Right? We ran this for a bunch of brokers in September and October of 2019, did 2.3 billion with a B. I have to say it all the time because people think I'm saying million. $2.3 billion in volume for all our brokers across the country that we've kind of ever had. And we said to them all, listen, we're sick to death of you guys not clearing your database. To prove a point, we're going to do it for you. It started off with about a dozen guys. Just a dozen. And I progressively introduced it to more and more and more and more people until it was introduced to everybody. Now, we did that for free, except when people made more than $5 million in volume. Right? At that point, there was an escalating scale, and we would just pay it on the basis of... Because we wanted people to get involved. If we made it a no-brainer, if we said, you do $5 million in volume, you pay us $3,000. And it wasn't $3,000, it's like $2,200. All the way up to, if you did $100 million in volume, you paid us $18,000, right? Which is not a lot of money, given that it's $100 million in actual volume, in conversions, right? So actual loans that were written and processed. And there was a scale. I think it went from 20 million right up to 20, 50, and then 100. We had three scales. So if people did 85 million, then they'd just pay us on the basis of 50. And it was run for close to 3 months, I think. But the biggest period was that 7-week period. So $2.3 billion. It turned into, after about 3 weeks of running it, we were starting to see loans being processed every 3 to 5 minutes at times. You can imagine what that's like. It was a very dynamic environment in this crazy little office, although I only had 1 or 2 people working here at any one time. And then we had Kate and Rebecca and Sarah, I think they were just the girls that were assigned, and they were all doing the remote stuff. Kate is obviously, people that know Kate, she's a banking executive, probably one of the young guns in the banking world. She no longer works with us. We still see her all the time, but she's gone on to work with one of the major banks in one of a very, very, very major role, actually. I expect her to be CEO within 5 years, probably 3 years, because she's amazing. So she was the top gun of the group. She was doing just amazing work, and she was only working for 5.5 hours a day because she'd drop a kid off at school or something and, work through the day, and then that was it. It was just, and her results were amazing. But $2.3 billion clearing your existing database. Now everyone's going to tell you your database is a gold mine. Ignore it, and someone will steal it. If it's a pot of gold, it is a literal, well, not literal pot of gold, but it's a pot of gold. If you ignore it, someone will come and steal it from under you, and they will, and they do, and we've seen it over and over. If you ignore your clients, someone else will come in and write a loan for them instead.
And during those phone calls, it was an incredible number of times. Oh, I just organised a loan last week, or in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. The number of times.
I'm in the process of writing a loan now with another broker, or organising one through the bank.
Paul, if it was ever an interesting story, because Paul was working at your desk actually, whenever Paul came across an interesting phone call, he'd pop the loudspeaker on so I could listen in. And the number of times people would say, oh, I'm actually walking around right now just inspecting a property. Or I'm actually just on my way to the brokers. I'm actually in the car. That sort of thing came up more often.
On the positive side too, yeah.
A different broker.
Oh,
and Paul was really good. And like I said to you last night when we were recording this other thing, he's MBA qualified. He lectured at a uni. He's really well spoken, amazingly well spoken. Actually, he's got a very, very deep voice. Yeah. He's got a broadcast voice. He did voiceovers and things for all sorts of people. So when he talks to people, he sounds amazing. He really does. That hasn't cut out yet.
No, going well still.
Oh, that's good. So he'd always say, do you look, if that was the case, look, Domenico's the best at what he does. How about, look, I'll just get him to give you a call and just get a second opinion. You don't want to, it's always good to get a second opinion. You don't know how much you can save. Domenico's got access to more products than most brokers. We don't want you paying any more than you have to. Please, let's book something in now. How's tomorrow? Paul was really good with that, and everyone was receptive. He had just a knack with people, and Kate was the same. Kate was exactly the same. She was just faster because Paul got into the habit of just chatting with people, which is fine. I remember when Gabriella was doing a subsequent follow-up. It wasn't really a Jupiter program. This was during COVID. It was relief for one of the brokers in Victoria. He just wanted to check up on everyone. And because it was a check, there were phone calls that went for 20 or 30 minutes. And I was... we obviously listen to the call recordings for quality and control purposes, and the funny conversations that take place there. Anyway, so Jupiter is a database clearing program. We gave plenty of examples of that last night in a podcast we did on our
platinum program.
Our platinum program, which is a program that guarantees $120 million a year per $120. Yeah, $120.50. No, but $120 million a year in volume for our brokers on top of what they're already doing. And obviously we can do that because we're a marketing company. We've been doing it for 25 years or 24 years, and we know what works. And the funny thing is, a very small percentage of that is paid promotion. In fact, in that program where we guarantee $120 million a year, we only put paid promotion in place only because we put all their marketing assets in place. Because it's a dedicated program, we put up all the marketing funds, put all the marketing this and marketing that. So in order to test everything, we need to get some traffic through the funnels and so on. So we put maybe 1,000 through a month. But that generates a fraction of the volume.
Yeah, and that goes back to our philosophy of using sources, having multiple sources.
No source of lead generation should ever be ignored.
Yep, and after that 12 months, we would like them to continue that on and at least have it experienced and have that set up correctly. So we definitely want that in place during the 12 months.
It absolutely has to be in place within about 4 weeks. When we set that program up, the Platinum program, we have virtually everything in place within 4 weeks, and that means we're able then to spend all our time to drive business. Virtually every Platinum client we've ever had has achieved pole position. That is number one in Google and Bing, and that generates enormous amounts of traffic. We talked last night. I don't want to go into the benefits of SEO, but certainly if you're ignoring the organic sources of traffic in your business, you're literally throwing 20 odd ready to go leads away every single week. It is the most amazing source of business. So if you craft your business around, being a magnet for organic business, then you will get organic business. If you can't be found, you can't be found. The only way to get traffic then is relying back on relationship-based and other programs and paid promotion. I'm not going to go into that now. There's a whole bunch of stuff. There's a video we did on SEO.
Yeah, it was one of the earlier videos.
Yeah, it was one of the early videos. NPS. Do you remember what NPS stands for?
Net Promoter Score.
Net Promoter Score. People get it all the time. I've copied the question down because I never remember exactly how it's worded. This is from The Loyalty Effect, a book written by Frederick Reichheld. It's Reichheld. And the one question he uses to determine the referability of a business, on a scale of 1 to 10, please indicate how likely you would be to refer XYZ to friends, acquaintances, or business associates. Now, promoters, there's a way of determining the average score, but generally individuals are considered promoters if they're 9 or 10, passive 7 or 8, and detractors 6 or below. It's kind of useless. Anybody in the business will say a Net Promoter Score is kind of useless. Now, we used to use it as almost an alternative to Jupiter. And I used to run these at least for a day for each broker I took on, because I needed to understand their business and I needed to understand their communication and relationship strategy. The only way I could identify that was to talk to 20, 30, 40, 50 of their clients. So I used to make those phone calls on their behalf, which brokers always thought was a little strange. Why are you doing this phone call work rather than passing it on to one of the younger staff members? First of all, I tended to get better results. People would listen to me. I've got an older voice. You don't want some girl calling, just young girl who sounds like a little squeaky mouse and sounds like they're reading off a script sometimes. So I'd call because it was just very fluid and natural for me. And I'd say, I've got just 2 or 3 questions. It will take literally 30 seconds. We'd always advise them beforehand via email or text message that the call would be coming in the next 24 hours, and we'd put a post on their website. So if people wanted more information, we'd never give them a link in the text message. We'd say, if you're after more information, there's a link on the homepage of the website. Click on it. It will take you to detail exactly why this survey has been completed. Generally speaking, the results were anonymised when they were passed back to the broker. There are a couple of cases where they weren't, but in almost all cases they were. We generate an NPS, but the purpose was not necessarily the NPS survey, getting that result, right? It was talking to the clients and converting them. Because if somebody said, how likely to refer, and it was a 9 or a 10, I would say, how many have you referred in the last 6 months? If it was 0, I'd say, listen, it's, I'd like people to have a chat with, XYZ, with Domenico. Do you mind if I have him give you a call? Mind if I schedule a call in? And I'd give them a time and date. I'd send them a text message. And that's how the system worked. We'd run that for people. Right? It always worked better when the program is run by someone else, and certainly when it's run by us, right? Because, for most brokers, we are so disconnected from their operation that a call coming from us, we're a very sterile, impartial group. Even if they screamed and told us how bad they were as a broker, we didn't care what they were saying. So is that a 3? We just didn't care. We didn't care because, we were there to improve upon their processes.
Yeah, it gave us a chance to at least find out why they weren't happy with the service. And
that's right.
What we could do with the company to business and the business to fix it up.
They were the people I liked talking to. Say, what happened? Say, I'm an independent arbitrator. Essentially, what happened? How did this work out? And look, a lot of the time it wasn't the broker's fault. It's just some loans fall apart. People lose deposits here and there. It might be a delay with the banks where the broker has no control. There are all these things that might happen.
Or they don't qualify.
Look, a loan might not go ahead. They might, put a deposit down, even if it's a couple of $1,000 to hold a unit, and conditional on finance. And I don't. There are all these cases that potentially cause problems. But the point is I used to do this NPS survey, and now I do not. If the growth program, no one in the office does the NPS survey. What we do is run the Jupiter program, so we get their database. And guys, if you're going to... We've had guys, I mentioned this last night, and I got so cranky, I wanted to strangle someone. If there was a case where a guy we'd asked a guy 42 times for his contact list. If you don't give us your contact list, there's nothing we can do with it. And the part of that bothered me was not the fact they didn't give it to us. We couldn't care less. If he wants to do his own work, he can do it. We were doing it as a favour, Essentially around that time we were running the Jupiter program. So we're looking at over a year and 3 months ago, we started saying, give us. We need this because we're going to run Jupiter and we're going to run your behalf. It's a best interest duty responsibility. It's imposed upon us by legislation. If you're going to say customer first, if you're going to say that has any kind of meaning in your business, then you have to mean that the customer comes first. You have to look after your people. The fact that so many people... I will ask people in that questionnaire, how many times do you contact the broker? How many times do you contact the client, once a loan is settled? And it is often 0. It is more often than not 0, right? People just don't care. or they don't have the time. One of the two.
With the NPS score, I'm trying to remember now the discussion we had about the timing of that too. If it's been done, before as a loan got written, or how many weeks after the loan, and the effect that has, that makes it really arbitrary and sometimes unrealistic on what you actually obtain as a score.
Yeah, the first 3 months after the relationship you have with a broker is very adversarial in nature initially. It's back and forth. It's a lot of screaming. It's a lot of give me this, give me this, give me this, give me this. I need this return. I need this again. Go to the bank and get that sorted out. I need you to talk to an accountant and print that out. What's this? It's horrible. The brokers, they're trying to put this stuff together and it's just nagging. It's like having... I'm not going to say it. My wife's Croatian. No, I'm kidding. But not really. So it's just irritating.
So the first part of the relationship. Yeah.
So
as the loan comes in and they move into the home.
But once it's settled, all of a sudden that dissipates and they kind of forget everything that happened beforehand. Now, our post-settlement program, so Edge, is designed to give clients a magnificent experience post-settlement. Right? Post-settlement is more than a gimmick. Right? It's a vocational responsibility. So by the time we've contacted them 4 times in that first 6 weeks or so, if they're paying fortnightly, and all the emails and the gifts and everything else, then... of course, they're going to say, yeah, he's actually quite good. I wasn't sure initially, So that score is inflated by way of the fact that post-settlement is a completely different relationship with the client. Or it's based on a completely different relationship with the client. The pre-settlement stuff is a nightmare. If you ask that question 3 hours before settlement, no, you wouldn't get the same score. You just would not. So that result is compromised in so many different ways. So the only way to do it efficiently is 6 months after settlement, then every couple of years. Even not every couple of years, because the nature of the NPS implies that you've had some sort of contact with them. So once they've matured into another product, another 6 months, and the way we do it now is not via telephone, not via anything else. A database clearing program is just that. It's very specific and crafted in such a way that makes it very high converting. But the NPS survey, when we looked at our batteries then, I sort of got sidetracked. It happens a lot at the moment. What was I saying? Do you remember?
It's very high converting. Oh, actually, that's
the NPS survey, now we send an email. So it's a dedicated kind of section that is focused on recording the scores and everything else. And details are in the marketing guide. I think there's a screenshot of the actual email to send. And what we do now is we just it's a text email, and it's got to click on the score you'd give on a 1 to 10. 10 being awesome, 1 being the worst. And that will take to our system. We'll record the details and all that sort of stuff. Create some amazing statistics and do everything it's meant to do, and you can automate that as well. You can automate that on the basis of other rules, or just send it off to a batch group. So that's where NPS has ended up. We don't put as much faith into the NPS survey anymore, but we never did. The result has always been kind of garbage for a couple of reasons, and I'll talk about those, but it's always been kind of garbage. First of all, because it's compromised in so many different ways. And second, because what do you do with the result once you get it? Okay, you have to have an ongoing program first and foremost. If that result is going to mean anything, you have to run it every single year so you can see the measurable improvements.
Yes, that comparison of one number to the other, that's important.
That's right.
The first result, look, you can compare it to other people in the industry, but really it's that comparison to itself over time that we're looking at, the trend. Is the word I was looking for? Yeah,
that's exactly what we're looking for, a trend. But what does it mean right now? You know what I mean? Like if we get a score and it says 6.7 right now, 6.7 is our score. And by the way, our average client score now is 9.6. Everyone says 10. But that's compromised because we give the survey at a time when people are seriously happy about the way in which they've been treated. That score comes 6 months after settlement, or 4 months after settlement or something. I don't remember. So it's on the unhappy or the happy end of the scale. People haven't had enough time to get pissed off with their broker yet. That happens after 20 months when they realise that the rate they're paying is a little bit higher than it should be, and their broker hasn't contacted them for 10 months. Although that doesn't happen with us, and we'll talk about that with Edge. So, the NPS is not the most realistic indicator. We use that as a mechanism or as a Trojan horse, if you like, into other discussions in a way that introduced us to people in a different way. So, NPS, where to from here, amigo?
Into Edge.
There's got to be a bit more to talk about with Jupiter and Pluto, surely.
Or more Saturn. Oh, Jupiter?
No, Saturn. Look, it doesn't matter. I'll come back to it. With those two programs, I will come back to them. It generates massive amount of volumes, by the way, like massive amount of volumes. Like the programs we run internally, just for our Pluto, for our Platinum guys, will even our growth guys, when we're running on their behalf, will routinely return hundreds of millions of dollars a month. We're seeing those volumes all the time. And when we return that back to the client and we put a program in place for them to follow, we know that practice will continue to repeat itself over time because they've seen the value in it. It's very difficult for brokers to assign lots of manpower and resources into these sorts of programs when they don't know if it works. Of course it works. Of course it works. It's the most profitable goddamn thing you can do. Now, this leads us onto Edge, which is a post-settlement program. Everyone in the industry has tried to copy us, right? There is one sub-aggregator with AFG 2.5 years ago. They sent out a bunch of emails that were carbon copies of the ones that I had written. Everyone is copying us in the industry, and everyone's technology is shithouse. Genuinely 100% garbage, most of them. And ours isn't fantastic, but it works. You know what I mean? It's not rocket science. What we're doing here is not rocket science. And I'm going to show you how to do this or tell you how to do this without our systems. Because nothing is more important than post-settlement. Again, for all those reasons that we've talked about 100 times, best interest, customer first, you've got legislated obligations now. It's a responsibility that you look after your clients. Your commitment to service and quality and care does not end at settlement. So what do? It's a very basic system that once someone settles, we put them into what's called a Edge routine, which is it programs in a phone call. Actually, it works over 2 separate time periods. One is the first 100 days, and the second is the next 3 years. All right, so 100 days and 3 years. We figured that people within that time period will develop or mature into something else. If they don't, we renew them into a new Edge sequence that excludes the first 100 days because that's no longer important. So what do we do in the first 100 days that's important? Okay, we're developing passionate advocates and brand referrers. Okay. We're developing people into being referrals because this is a referral program as well. The post-settlement program is disguised as, it's either the referral program is disguised as post-settlement and post-settlement is disguised as a referrer. We often say that loyalty and service are neither a substitute for profit nor a gimmick for making easy money. All right. In this case, there is overlap. There's commercial value, but it's absolutely not a gimmick. It is legislated. This is required. This is what we need to do. Still to this day, no one does it. Some people fall back onto BS post-settlement email systems like ActivePipe, right? Who run the worst bloody post-settlement email program on earth. It is horrible. It's horrible. It is just ordinary. And the thing is, a post-settlement program is not, absolutely 100% not, or at least shouldn't be reliant on email.
Well, yeah.
That is just what irritates me. An email marketing system should not have a focus on post-settlement programs because it's not an email-based system. It's a human-based system, and it's just supported in a sense by email and by text messaging and other means. And that's why our integrated system joins all these things together and just makes it easy. Just makes it easy. So let's talk about the first 100 days. Settlement, phone call on settlement, text message, and email. 3 things. First payment, same thing. Second payment, same thing. Third payment, same thing. First payment is very straightforward, just making sure the funds are available, just making sure you were set up, has the bank been okay to you, got all the paperwork, all this sort of stuff. The second payment, just making sure that, and the first one, takes into account offsets and all that sort of stuff. The second one is, or just, basically checking in, making sure the first payment went okay. How's the house going? Is there anything I can do? Have you had any trouble with the bank? Because let me know, I'll take care of it for you. You got to be there for them. And this is a minimum contact, by the way, but keeping in mind that most people pay fortnightly, so you're calling them every 2 weeks. Right? Then the third contact is very much leaning towards, I'm going to get some referrals off you. If you call someone, doesn't matter who you call, and say, I want referrals. You don't say it like that, by the way. That's the language differs. But if you're after referrals, you do not, and you absolutely do not just call someone and expect them to give them to you. You have to provide. We talk a lot about reciprocity in marketing, and certainly even with the relation to the lead magnet system. So reciprocity applies, and that is, you have been so good to these people now. You have certainly demonstrated your value and your expertise and all this sort of stuff. They're going to want to return that favour somehow. They're going to want to talk about you, right? We want to create an audience. We want to create chatter about the service that we've just provided. So on payment 3, we'll call them up and say, look, I will call you progressively over the next. I need to keep in regular contact with you, but you might not hear from me now for a few months. But if you need me, please call me. I am going to send you some details if that's okay. Okay, we've got a referral program in place in the company, and if you refer 3 people, we send you a couple of movie tickets, or we send you a book of movie tickets in some cases. What you send people varies. One guy sent people mortgage tomatoes. Google it. They exist. And that was clever, The mortgage tomatoes were a bunch of seeds; they'd grow, so it was nice. If you didn't like tomatoes, you'd probably prefer a couple of movie tickets. But that's the thing; based on a set criteria, you can determine what people are provided with, and it's just a little bit of a thank you for taking, for providing those details. When people have time to look at a computer screen, you're able to provide instructions on a screen and say, look, we're after some good people. Give us those people that have the most expensive properties, kind of thing, in a very subtle language. You're not going to say it like that, obviously. But you're able to use a language that you can't use in person, or a lot of people don't know how to use in person. There was a story, a teacher was telling me a little while ago about this little kid who just didn't bathe. He stank all the time. And she said in a classroom environment it was really bad, and she said she did not know how to approach the parents and tell them their little boy was smelly, right? And she was absolutely heartbroken, and in the end, after a couple of weeks, because it got to the point where she thought, okay, this boy's hygiene is compromising on his health, I need to talk to him. It's got a happy ending, by the way, and she's involved in the mortgage space now, in a part-time, and she managed to garnish the courage. She said she didn't know how she was going to approach it, but said, your boy must sweat a lot or something. She approached the subject very differently. So your boy must sweat a lot or something, because I'm starting to see, questionable hygiene at certain times of the day. Is he bathing at home as he should? Is he looking after himself? And it turns out that they had issues with the water supply in their house. So this family, she worked in a very low socioeconomic kind of environment. This is not something you get in Vaucluse. It's a different class of people. They bathe in spring water, imported from Finland over there. So this poor kid, just wasn't getting back. So she opened up her home to that family. In fact, she had a granny flat out the back as well when they stayed there. Like it was kind of a happy ending. They were in circumstances that they couldn't manage. They were in housing commission provided accommodation. The boy had obviously, he was going to school, but he was causing obviously issues. And that, when, I don't know why that popped up in particular, but it was very recent. I was talking to her like literally within the last 4 or 5 days, and she said when I had to bring that subject up with the mother, she said it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as a teacher. Or not the most hardest, but it was a very hard thing to have to do. And she said, you know, it was actually easier because it's not nearly as hard as you think. People don't respond as you think they will. And we talked about this the other day together, you and I. People are always scared of what the other person might think.
Yeah, the fear a lot of the time is greater than the reality. Even if there is a bit of a disconnect or they are a bit offended, it's not to the severity that people build up in their mind. And so, look, you're going to have the opposite too, where sometimes it can be beyond that, but we're talking overall, it's not.
About 18 months ago, I met up with one of the rising stars in Citibank. He's a young fella, and I met him at, I said, I'll meet you halfway. This was a business-related meeting, and people expect marketing. Right, we're here in our T-shirts and our crummy shirts over the top and our torn jeans and stuff, right? That's us. We're in a home office. We're not going to do something silly like, put on a suit. I think I put on pants once. I'm wearing pants now. I meant pants. I went to meet this fellow who was a little bit younger than me. I looked at him on Citibank's website, and he's on their, page of executives. And I rocked up to this meeting looking not much different to the way I am now. And he was so thankful. And we met up in a very formal environment, a bar. And he said, can you give me 5 minutes? I said, duck out and do something. He came back in a pair of T-shirts with a hat on backwards and said, he said, that's better. And it was just, when you talk to people, you have to, look, you could write, people have written thousands and thousands and thousands of books on this, and we've got a lot of information there in the finance marketing guide on communication strategies, because a lot of brokers don't understand that communication is key. It's just key. And I think we've lost the art. You were saying just last night, no one picks up the phone anymore. People manage their relationships via text messaging and email. And it's very easy to get on a phone call and just talk to someone, but people get anxious when they look at the phone and go, oh my God, it's a human being. Why didn't they send a text message? So, don't know where I'm going, but
even with the text message there, people are trying to do so much sometimes that they prefer to send that message, do something else, send that message, do something else. And so it becomes very disjointed, even for them. And the phone call actually will save them time.
Phone calls are fantastic. And people, I don't think, at least your customers and consumers, won't ever complain that you called them.
Answer.
It doesn't matter what sort of messaging service you're using, whether it's text messaging or email or WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal or whatever the hell you're using. The telephone, picking it up and calling them, very old school, is kind of what works. And that's what people like. You develop relationships like that. You actually talk to people. You bounce your ideas and ideals back and forth. You develop something. You develop a friendship. You don't develop a friendship via text messaging. I think Facebook has deceived people into thinking that a friendship now is based on clicking accept. Doesn't quite work like that, does it?
Thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up. And then they'll see a video and post miserably, LOL, and they're not laughing. Just digital has ruined a lot of people, and those people that rise above digital are the ones that are doing well. And we say that despite the fact that we are digital geeks, man. Like, we have an amazing digital marketing system. We know marketing inside out. We've built up so many broking companies and other businesses, but we still say that nothing is more important than relationships, because you're in a relationship-based business. So I got really cranky last night when I hear This is where I start screaming. I'm going to have to take a few breaths. When I hear some people in the digital industry, and we've saved every single webinar we've ever watched in this respect, right? And all these ads that pop up. So at some point I'm going to unleash and go nuts on these people that have engaged in professional negligence by encouraging people or discouraging people from engaging in those programs that will return the most profit. No, don't worry about that. Just Facebook. That's all you need to worry about. So when I hear people say, don't go out and buy another lunch, don't go and do this, don't go to a networking event, don't go and do this, don't go and do that, just throw your money into Facebook. It's a lead generation machine. And a lot of the time in the advertising you see on Facebook, they won't actually tell you what they're selling. Clearly it's Facebook advertising. Just be up fucking front and say it, right? It's kind of like the Amway thing. We don't want to mention the Amway word because people won't come. So if someone knows that I've discovered the secret to selling mortgage loans, I'm selling 2,682, I'm getting that many leads every month, which is kind of like an actual ad. I'm going to show you the secret formula of success, the secret funnel blueprint. You add blueprint or, funnel blueprint or all these funny words together and makes it sound fancy pants when that's their word for MailChimp and lead pages and a BS email experience. Like, people don't get it. Remember Napoleon Dynamite bought a time machine from eBay or something, or Amazon? He's got a big box sent to him in his home. And brokers get, brokers get sucked into all this sort of stuff all the time. They're not actually provided with a tangible and workable asset. And these knuckleheads, these absolutely reckless knuckleheads, are discouraging them from engaging in those programs that will drive them most growth and most profit. And that irritates the living shit out of me.
Yeah,
right? Don't do that.
Go back, look at their services. If the main service they provide is Facebook and that's pretty much it, then how are they going to recommend anything else?
Well, somebody said the other day, he sent me a screenshot of this guy's website and he says, one day I did some ads for a friend of mine and I thought, I have some talent with it. So I learned a little bit and now I'm in the digital industry. And it was like 2 years ago. I'm thinking, no, what you're doing, because I was questioning one of the campaigns that was provided to me by one of our clients. And said, this is absolute garbage, like pure rubbish garbage. Where did you get this and why are you doing it? He was using Kartra. And I said, no, this was provided to me via another guy I worked with about 3 months ago. All the leads that came through were garbage. And the pixel was replicated. His pixel was not his own pixel. Just criminal. That should land you in jail. That should land you in marketer's jail if there was such a thing. Which is... Anyway, there's so much going on in the industry, right? There was an article last night in, where was it? I think it originally was published on The Guardian or something and then made its way onto sites like news.com.au and all that sort of stuff, about people paying offshore actors money for SEO-related strategies. Did you get that? I sent that to you via email.
Got to the email. We've been doing videos all day.
I should have passed it through Teams. If I had stuck it on Teams, you would have read it. And he talks about people paying, $10,000 to $12,000, $15,000 a year. Some of these people $1,000 a month, $8,000 here, $5,000 here, whatever else. You don't pay money for people for SEO anymore, unless you're paying someone. We don't like people paying us for SEO programs. We'd rather people gravitated towards or at least applied for, because we don't take many people onto our platinum program, but at least applied for the platinum program, where we guarantee a top spot. But we also guarantee you $120 million a year. And in the contract, it says very clearly, if we don't get your top spot, we'll get you front page. We aim for top spot, but we'll get you $120 million a year. That makes up for it. So stop your complaining. But it's impossible to build a really compelling content strategy for a business without getting on the front page these days, because 99.9999999% of brokers... I shouldn't use that stat because there aren't any brokers left on the planet. That's barely one broker. But you know what I mean? Like, there is a handful of brokers in this country that actually apply a marketing effort and have a content strategy in place and social and so on. So Edge is there to build amazing referral relationships, and it returns our clients billions of dollars. Right? Billions. That's because nothing is more powerful than a post-settlement referral program. Look, we have programs as well for formal introducers and partnerships. Partnerships are defined by a formalised arrangement. If you like, introducers are more, they feed you with the odd client, whatever else. That's a whole other program we're not going to discuss, but it is supported by partnerdashboard.com.au, and it is amazing. Now, we talked about this last night I say last night and I'm pointing up at the fan. I don't know why, but we talked about it last night, and we've got quite a lot of brokers, a huge number of brokers that are picking up anywhere between 30 and 100 leads a month on the back end of a relationship they have with, say, a real estate agent or an accountant or something else. So those sorts of things happen. If you're in the business of using Facebook, so if Facebook is your primary means of traffic, or if Facebook is somewhere where you have to gravitate towards, then that's the problem. It means your business wasn't slick enough. You can still use Facebook to kickstart it, and you can get it to a point where Facebook won't be necessary anymore, because each time someone comes in off Facebook, they can, from each one client, you should be able to develop another 3 over 12 months, minimum 3 over 12 months. We've seen one guy develop 12 or 14 over like 3 or 4 months, and he didn't even get a loan with the broker. It's the example I use for a guy that would never normally qualify. If you tried to qualify him online, you wouldn't be able to. And my broker, he called me up one day and said, look, I've got this guy, I don't know what to do, and it's just not going to work. What do you suggest? Is there anything he can do? And he had defaults, and he didn't want that much money. Now, what we didn't know is he was the CEO of a large company that went bankrupt. So he's doing really well, and he fell onto really hard times, probably very close to actually being homeless and all sorts of things. Like, he fell on really, really hard times, but he was the CEO of a household name company and brand. So his network was actually worth a lot of money. It's just he was too embarrassed to go to him. He's too embarrassed to ask for money. So he was just taking care of himself. Went and with his little bit of cash, he went and said, look, I need this loan. Didn't qualify, went to Pepper. Right, I said, look, you. This is to my broker. I said, you're 100 yards up from Pepper. Just walk down and sit down with him and see if there's anything they can do. They're probably, based on the criteria you've just said, they're the only people I know that would probably look at it out of all the lenders that look at, risky products. And he got a loan, right? They actually approved it very, very quickly. And he's the guy that was responsible for like 14 referrals within 3 months. So he did get the loan. I said before he didn't. That was another story, which I might tell as well. No, I'll come back to it. But so this guy referred 14 people or something. It was just out of control. They were all very wealthy people, all living in the North Shore with $5 million homes. So this broker was, holy crap, that one guy, that one visit to Pepper has now resulted in like, $40 million, $50 million in volume or something. Those sorts of things happen. And if you look after everyone, karma will take care of the rest. Not a believer in karma. Let's say common sense. Let's say
Karma will.
Yeah, karma. Karma can take on whatever form you want. So let's just say that's the case. So anyway, the post-settlement programs, guys, are just the bee's knees. They do amazing things to your business. Now, I'm going to moving on from Edge, because the book goes into a lot of detail. It details how the schedule is maintained over the course of after the first 100 days through 3 years. We put a whole bunch of bookings into your calendar. We either drip feed them, so when they're required, or we just schedule them in advance. In fact, the scheduling we do in advance, and the tasks we create in real time. So the tasks just aren't sitting there, contact this person on this date. So we send those when they're actually required, but the calendar booking will be made straight away, so you don't throw something on top of it. But because the client isn't expecting a call, you can move that about. So if you look at your calendar and you've got all these sporadic or disconnected and disjointed bookings, you can just drag them into a single day and just call them one after the other. And the purpose of those calls is defined by a little summary panel that's made available within the platform. So you just go through there and have a read of what's necessary. If you need to look up their file, you do that. You will never, ever, this is what we refer to as clawback insurance, because you won't lose a client. You just will not lose a client. Will ya?
Well, you're in their mind. You're looking after them. They're happy. If they need to borrow more money, they need to change anything in their mortgages, you're already there, ready with it to talk to them.
Saturn, the highest volume program we have in this company, formally protected by an NDA. The first time we've ever exposed any of the information relating to Saturn is in this booklet. We've only provided as much information as is necessary to kind of dip people's feet into it. And I've said in that book we've provided everything without restraint. There are 2 relationship programs we absolutely and positively do not talk about because they're reserved for our platinum guys. And it will be a lifetime before anybody actually picks up on what they are, because we fell into them by accident about 7 or 8 years ago. So, and before I do this, by the way, we've had a article in draft. This is relating to all sort of the Jupiter programs, the Pluto programs, all the post-settlement stuff and everything else. We've had a program in draft for the better part of 3 or 4 years on our website, and it's how we did $340 million in under 4 months. $340 million in volume in under 4 months. That was one of our Brisbane guys in late 2015, early 2016. Think about that, guys. $340 million, and that was essentially it was a combination Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn program. You know, that's interesting because that came off specific audiences that were connected to me through former employment. And it just goes to show the power, though, of those programs. If you're a relationship-based business, we do well. We mentioned the 7-Eleven program last month. The guy doing $400 million a year now. It's been in the business for 2 years. That's $400 million with 3 brands or 2 brands. No, 2 brands. And about to take over the world. Like he's going to be the top-ranking broker next year. Next year, our guy there in Western Sydney would be the top-ranking broker. He does more loans in the eastern suburbs than most brokers in the eastern suburbs. He does big developments out, Western Sydney, out near Badgerys Creek Airport. So he's taking over the world, this guy, and he's achieved that through a cold program, which is 7-Eleven. 7 calls before 11 a.m. Call 7 people you don't know. Just call them up, learn a little bit about their business. If someone called me up at 9 o'clock in the morning and said, look, so it wouldn't work calling a digital agency. No one's going to sell us anything. But if we were a real estate office, in fact, we are a real estate office. Dom and I are real estate agents. We have a real estate arm. So that's a funny thing. But if a broker called us and said, look, I'm just a local mortgage broker. I just wanted to learn a little bit more about your business. I just was really curious. You're nearby. I just wanted to see what sort of things you guys did. Giddy up. Let's talk. Yeah, if you ever want to have a beer, let's go down to Lockie's on Cowpasture Road. That's the joint with the train out the front, people. And you know what I mean? Like, it's people like people. If I get an email from someone, I'm gonna delete it. I don't want an email from someone, hi, my name, I'm looking for, synergy and connections, and it's almost as bad as. Do you need to answer that?
Yep, I'll come back.
We're going to morph out for a second. Ooh. All right. Saturn is a program, like I said, protected by an NDA for a long time. Not even all our brokers have been introduced to it, because we only introduced it to brokers that are capable of writing the program. I introduced it, I remember, to one guy in Victoria, and I hope I'm not identifying him by saying this to him, because I don't want him to know. But there were staff members within his office that said, I don't get it, And they had the capacity there because of staffing, and they're a growing business. They grew from like 20 million to maybe, probably 15 million to probably 75, 85 million in 12 months, 18 months maybe. So it's a good step. They've been very progressive, but they could have taken it to $250 million had they put a bunch of things into place. One of those was Saturn. So I spoke to this particular girl that was running the program, and she just didn't get it. And I said, look, I can only repeat myself so many times. If you don't get it, just do it. And you'll get it when it starts working. And the idea is this. geographic-based booklets. We produce booklets for different areas or municipalities or regions within various communities. So I like to do it on a postcode level. It potentially introduces 6,500, 7,000 books to Australia. The resources, by the way, we say it doesn't cost anything, but it does actually cost something in terms of time. If you have a program of this scope and of this magnitude, you have to assign the appropriate resources, which means you need sufficient staff to get it done. So if we get a book that's appropriate for first-time buyers, investors, or anyone else that's interested in a particular area, you get a book for, let's say, 2138. Postcode of Concord. Hello, everyone in Concord. So you get a postcode for 2138, and you get three pool cleaners, 3 dance studios, 3 plumbers, 3 electricians, 3 dog groomers, 3, all these particular businesses. You provide a little bit of information on all of them. You're actually going to call them up and say, I want to include you in my first home buyer booklet or investor guide or something, right? You'll talk to these people. You'll call them up and say, listen, I'm putting this book together. It's so people that are new to the area can reference a guide. They'll have your information. So if they need anything, they've got you in a book that they can print out and stick on the fridge or something. In reality, people wouldn't print it out. They'd have it on their PC or something, stick it in an email. Although we do see them print it out. And look, the idea here is, sure, you're going to provide those people on your website and people in the municipality or postcode or whatever else with a service. They get a fantastic book, 3 accountants, 3 real estate agents, 3 financial planners. They're actually the big ones. They're the big 9s. We have those in a big box in our guide. So it's 3 of a whole lot of people. But what you're doing throughout this process, if you've got 30 occupations that you expect to include in this booklet and you're having 3 of each, that's 90 people. Right, we've seen as much as 30% conversions on converting those people into clients.
Yeah, and
right?
That's the
power
catch of the Saturn program.
So it provides a massive service to the clients, and even a bigger service to the business, because you are maintaining this, you are building these relationships with these other businesses. When you call up these accountants, accountants are a really good source of loans because they've got paperwork. When you get a client, generally you get a client and everything you need in order to write that loan. It's really, really quite easy. But you very, very quickly and easily forge these friendships, relationships, and introduce relationships or partner relationships and so on. 90 people is a lot of people to make contact with. That does take time, but the conversions can be through the roof. So that's about 30% we've seen. We've seen a little bit more. Sometimes most of the time it's a little bit lower. But even if you convert 7 out of the 90, let's say 7, right? That's one of the guys sent me an email this morning and said, okay, and it was 7 out of, it was less than 60, right? It wasn't the full suite. And he converted 7. But that's still $6 million, $5 million maybe, depending on where you are. Could be more. If you're in Concord, 7 clients is going to be, 10 or 11, 12 million minimum. So that's a lot of volume. That's more people. That's more than most people do in a year. And I'm saying you can do that in a single day.
And then add to that the Edge program with the referral part of it, and it just keeps growing.
That's where it takes off.
And that's where the power of these referral programs all combined together really come together.
No program is disconnected.
And how the numbers you mentioned become reality, even though they sound absurdly high.
They sound ridiculous. When I tell people that, our platinum program returns from 120 mil. We have to slow ourselves down to get there. If we go full speed, they'll get that volume. And I mentioned last night, the reason we slow down is because we don't want to dump too much work on them straight away.
The back-end processes,
Yeah, the back end. It becomes too hard to manage too much business all at once because we do it for more than one person at the same time. And the broker gets too busy. So we spread it out, normally to 8 or 9 months. That gives us a 3 month window where we don't have to produce any volume. Normally we do. Like, why wouldn't you? We're only obligated to provide 120, but we always do a bit more. Just as a safety net.
And the booklets are appreciated by the first-time buyers. They got this book that just summarises all the services in the area, and it's not unusual when you move into a home needing services in the area. Like even Facebook, then the local groups on Facebook, the dads of the area, the mums of the area, they got the groups there, and the way they refer between each other, just because people are looking for local people to work with.
There's a broker in the North Shore I spoke to, not the North Shore, where was it? Somewhere in off Oxford Street or something, somewhere sort of in that area, even towards Bondi or something. A Scottish-sounding lady. Her business is based on Mum's group on Facebook. She paid 20 grand for this group and that group and this group. She bought groups because she understood that if you had that reach, I would never advocate buying a group or anything like that, because as easily as a group can be created, it can be taken down by Facebook. Someone only has to post an offensive cartoon, and all of a sudden, all you have to do is call a he who identifies as a she, a he, and that will get you banned. You know what I mean? Like Facebook's rules. You can call someone, and a beep, 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 beep. Facebook don't give a crap. But as soon as you call a transgender a he, they will cancel your account. We live in this really backwards cancer culture society. It's the nature of Facebook groups. Again, it's just something I wouldn't encourage people to pay for, or any kind of digital asset. I wouldn't get anybody to pay for anything, because it's so easy to build those up yourself. Now, I actually met with that program. Anyway, I won't go into those details, but Saturn is amazing, and it's digitized on our end. Our platform supports it. So it supports a generation of booklets. It's got an API there through to our system, which is called, I forget what it's called actually, but it provides information on all the geographic areas and points of interest and all those sorts of things around Australia. We've got an API, which is, as best I know, the only API of its kind, which lists every single school in Australia, and childcare centres, which is listed on our website. Actually, it's the one API I've put on our website, I think. So it lists the nearest 10 childcare centres and things like that. So the book itself becomes this amazing resource. Quite frankly, you get just as much information from Google, but the book itself carries a measure of trust. As a broker, you're saying, I trust this person, this person, this person, right? And the way you establish that trust in the other person is by talking to them, and getting a few photos and back and forthing and stuff. And you'll soon learn if they're crappy, if they're not very good, you'll know that. You won't put them in your little book. Note you put under each page is, if you encounter issues with any of the businesses listed within this guide, please let us know. So you do have a feedback email there or something like that, so you can make modifications to the book over time. And by the way, you can cycle these people over and over and over. So if you put 3 plumbers in and none of them care who you are or never want to talk to you again, and certainly aren't interested in a loan, you replace them. In our system with businesses, there are millions of businesses listed in our system. Once you, we haven't got a name for it really. We've been using reserve, but once you assign a business to your account, it gets removed from the database, and no other user can even call them. Right? That's important, isn't it? Because we don't want business overlap. We don't want XYZ broker calling up, a plumber and saying, I want you in my book, and then 2 days later, I'm a broker, I want you in my first-time buyer booklet. So we don't want that overlap. So as soon as someone is being added to a booklet, they get removed from the database and no one else can even see them. So that's a Saturn database, and that is all automatically created. It's drip-fed into your system after a couple of months. So after a couple of months of having been a subscriber to the digital marketing social media system, that just drip-feeds in. It's part of the software suite. It's just part of it. If you play your cards right, that will return as much volume as you want, okay? As a relationship-based business, that will return as much volume as you want. The Edge programming company with that, starting off and kickstarting with Jupiter and Pluto. This is what business is about. It's about relationships. So when people tell you that, breathe. So when people tell you that all you have to do is invest money in digital, they're full of shit. They really are. They really don't know what they're talking about. They are so disconnected from the reality of the world, and they've never had a successful mortgage broking business, first and foremost. Do you remember the Curiosity Show? Those two.
I love that show.
Did you really?
Yeah,
What do you mean by popcorn thing? Is that the? Is that right? Okay, that's
That's the name of the.
yeah, that's the name of the piece. Yeah, your Julie plays that in the. I've heard her play that. I think, haven't I?
Yeah.
That's like her favourite song, isn't it? Anyway, the Curiosity Show. There's two weirdos with black moustaches. That's very 80s, late 70s, 80s. It must be early 80s. They did an experiment once. Last night I mentioned the dropping a ping pong ball into a fish tank full of mousetraps, and it goes in a second. Like every mousetrap is if they're open,
Loaded,
yeah, if they're loaded, open, closed, if they're open, yeah. So if they're loaded, and you drop a ping pong ball in, it bounces around and bounces off everything, and all the traps go flying up into the air and everything else, and it's about a second. Right, and it really doesn't matter how big the tank is or how big the space is where you drop the ball, as long as that ball keeps on bouncing around and those traps keep on throwing up in the air, they will all bounce. The same thing applies with dominoes, and that's the Curiosity Show. They did this experiment once where they just flicked one domino in the middle, and yeah, we see it all the time. It's nothing special, but this particular demo on the Curiosity Show is something I remember as like a really, really, really little kid. And it just spread out like wildfire. And I don't remember the point they were trying to make, but there was a point they were trying to make. Yeah. You remember the experiments, you don't remember. Oh, that's no good. I hope that recorded the audio. Uh-oh. Dom's battery died, so hopefully there's no issues with his mic there. Anyway, the point is, and I'll make these very few points and then I'll tidy up. The point is that that's a relationship network. You know, through 6 degrees of separation, we know everyone on this planet. Through, I think, 2 or 3 degrees of separation, 12 people deep, it reaches like 12 billion people or something. Like the stats are extraordinary. It's not difficult to go deep and reach the right people and you know, don't discriminate. Someone in housing commission that needs a loan on their car, a couple of people deep can lead you through to a $40 million mansion on Sydney Harbour. You know, people know people who know people. The world is connected in that way. And if you're open to talking to new people and new relationships and new experiences and so on, you do come across some really amazing people. So you know, be open-minded and you know, treat your relationship-based business as a relationship-based business with the respect that you know, those relationships deserve. All right, guys, if you're not watching this on a video and rather audio, we've just morphed back into day 2. We're recording this component on the second day. There are just a few things that we wanted to add to the program that you've just listened to. That was meant to be a 10 to 15 minute discussion. We always knew it was going to go a little bit over time. We didn't expect it to go for 2 hours. I think it was 2 hours, or was it managed content or something? There was another podcast that we did went for 2 hours longer than we expected. That's just because you can't shut Dom up. He talks too much. And the things I wanted to talk about, or just two or three things I wanted to introduce to people, because not everybody that is listening to this is utilising our software systems. So I just wanted to introduce a few ideas, you know, introduce a little bit of variety into the mix, maybe talk about something that people may not be familiar with. Now, this is religious for all our platinum guys. So for all those guys that come to us for the guaranteed 120 million a year, this is exactly what we do as a matter of course. In our post-settlement program, let's talk about the settlement gift. When you bought your first home 25 years ago, or whenever that was, it was a long time ago. When you bought your first home, do you remember if the mortgage broker gave you a gift?
I went straight through the bank, so...
Did you?
Yeah, no gifts, no.
Why was that? Because you're very pro-brokers.
I was actually working at Westpac, so I went through and got the staff loan.
Was that better than the...
Not really. Not when you look back at it. trying to remember now. The rate, you know what, you're talking a very small difference, 0.1 or something back then. But if you shopped around, you probably could have got that rate anyway.
You can always haggle.
Yeah.
People don't realise you can haggle with banks. And I'm seeing more and more. And by the way, when we ran that Jupiter program that we discussed before, a huge number of people worked for banks. And I remember Paul playing one call out aloud where someone said, I work for Combank, so I think I've got the best deal on the market. And the thing was, we didn't want to ask them, what are you paying, all that sort of stuff. In fact, we weren't really in a position to, especially Paul, because he was not a mortgage broker. He was not acting under any kind of authorised credit rep or anything like that. He was just calling to make contact and see if he could place them in a call with the relevant broker. But that happened more often than not. It happened routinely. And I don't know enough about those staff loans. So it's probably something I'm going to have to look into. But you can haggle with banks. You can absolutely haggle with banks. And I'm seeing a lot of people these days, a lot of people go to a broker and get educated and be provided with a choice of loans. And then they take those loans and go directly to a bank.
I had a friend of mine ring up the broker, and the broker told him to go to the bank.
Really?
To just ask him for a better rate, because it would have been quicker. Actually, that was Macquarie. It was quicker for them to go to Macquarie and ask them than for the broker to try and go through and get the extra 0.1 or 0.2. This was only recently with the rate drops over the last 12 months.
It hasn't been uncommon, at least historically, for banks to hijack customers' loans and then claw back on the broker's commissions, because they will call them after 6 months or 8 months. They're not meant to. There's meant to be a policy in place that prevents this, but I do see it all the time. All the time. And that is a bank will call up and say, look, we can actually offer you this right now. Is that something you want to do? Yep, the bank takes carriage of that loan and provides a clawback on the broker, despite the fact that it's the loan the broker placed them in. And it's not meant to happen. If brokers contest that, generally they'll win. But I do see it.
I have to go back and look in that one and see what actually happened and why the broker asked about bringing up to get the little rate reduction.
Is that the Brizzy broker that we were talking about the other day?
Yes, it was too, yeah.
He's actually a really good broker. He's very successful. Actually,
Highly successful,
probably
yeah.
one of the most successful in Queensland, I'd say. If not the single most successful broker.
Well, he's gone into the property part too. So
which has assisted his business.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That's feeding his broking business.
Yeah, exactly.
That's he's responsible for his own volume in multiple ways. No source of lead generation should be ignored. If you're able to inject your broking business with volume that you've, with business that you've generated elsewhere, you double dip on the commission. And that's perfectly acceptable. It's not, you're not doing anything that is dodgy. But it...
Yeah, I was going to say, one of his brokers, it went so well that one of his brokers saw how successful it was and broke off to create his own mortgage business.
Yeah, that happens all the time as well. Every single broker out there that has ever had anybody work for them has lost them after a period of time. When I was working in aviation, every single pilot that ever worked for any of the general aviation companies I worked for, and it didn't matter if it was the Royal Flying Doctor Service. I flew with the RFDS, flying turboprop King Air things, and I was flying small corporate aircraft for the government. I was those businesses. Everyone will always want to work for an airline, which there was only see. I had this discussion once with one of the people I worked with, and said, "You want to treat your people, train your people and educate them in a way that makes them the most capable in their field, so the top of their game. But you treat them well enough that they won't want to leave." And that was kind of the secret sauce to success. And in providing the training, people did appreciate and didn't want to go. But look, people always gravitate towards the airline. It's the same in the mortgage industry. People will always want their own business. They'll move into their own business. And if they've had good mentorship, like really good mentorship, they will understand how to build a relationship-based business. In their first year, they'll do 60 mil. Their first year, which can be a challenge if you're just kind of doing it yourself without guidance, without any assistance, without any belief medias backing you and stuff, then but 60 mil is good. And I see that all the time. I see guys get qualified and then go and open up their own business. They just find an aggregator and authorized credit representative, and they just go it alone. And a lot of them will be lucky to do 20 million. That's just the nature of the beast. Anyway, but people will always leave. They will always leave. We were talking about the Edge post-settlement system, and I asked you about the gift. And that took us down a rabbit hole.
And that was going to be that should have just been a 30-second conversation.
It's one of those discussions that brokers have all the time. I see it on our protected Platinum forum. There's only 30-odd people in that group, like only because they're the people that have done the Platinum program. So, and by the way, that's not on Facebook. Any serious group, any serious collaborative group will not be on Facebook. That's important, I think, to understand. I think the world needs to move away from Facebook for professional groups of people. Well, it's Facebook for workplace or whatever they call it, work.facebook.com or something. I remember, or work.com might even be a Facebook domain. Anyway, that's irrelevant, but real discussions for real businesses with real high-end people don't happen on Facebook. Anyway, the discussions oriented around what sort of gift you provide people upon settlement pop up all the time, not just in our groups, but everywhere within the industry. Most people are fairly clever about it. One guy I dealt with up in Queensland was, he gave them a hamper full of cheeses. And I always thought the reason I wouldn't have perishables like that is if you're going to transport cheese, and you need to deliver something like that because that sort of stuff goes off. A lot of people provide bottles of wine and champagne. One guy provided a case of beer. One guy provided a keg of beer. And I said, that's not acceptable because where are they going to put it? How are they going to tap it? How are they going to refrigerate it? All those sorts of things. But
the hamper's the one that I've most seen, or among groups of friends and that. So it's a hamper which is a mix of good quality goods with the champagne or the wine.
Yeah, that's great. And whatever it is, it's going to be appreciated. But the problem is everything in that respect is perishable. If you buy a bottle of wine, it'll end up in the fridge or in your garage on a shelf with 300 other bottles of wine. And if it's a hamper, everything goes in the pantry, and that's that. So about, 15 years ago, we introduced a new program where upon settlement, what we would do is, depending upon the type of customer as well, we would treat investors, second-time investors, and first-home buyers in particular very, very differently. Now, first-home buyers, let's talk about them because they were the group where what I'm about to describe will almost always apply, and that is we used to go to the State Library of New South Wales website. I just talked about the State Library of New South Wales, didn't I? I spend a lot of time on the State Library of New South Wales website, but we go to the State Library of New South Wales website or wherever they happen to have their home. The same applies in Queensland and Victoria and so on. And we find a historic picture, the oldest picture we could find of that home, if it existed and if it was good. Failing that, we'd get one of the street, and we'd also look for an aerial shot, the earliest aerial shot we could find of their neighbourhood, assuming we could identify the latitude and longitude, so the specific coordinate of their home, the very, very spot. We didn't want to just say, this is what this area used to look like. Your house is somewhere in here. And all the old survey photographs generally are tapered around the outside with the latitude and longitude. So if you're able to identify the home, you can then match it up and you can, put a little square there or something. You can put something in. We get them blown up at Officeworks. The best of the three photos. And sometimes there are a whole bunch we got to choose from. So we'd pick the best photo, we'd get it blown up to poster size, movie poster size almost, which costs about $35. It's a cheap frame from Kmart for $10. And in the bottom right, we'd give them a little plaque that they'd stick on. It's tiny. You don't want to ruin a picture. You don't want to ruin a fantastic picture with something written on the frame or something like that. And this was tiny. I'd say it's maybe 5 millimeters by, what's that? About 2.5 centimeters, 2 centimeters or so. And the inscription was very, very small and just had the broker's name and occasionally the number. I was always wary about the number because numbers do change. but just the broker's details. But you do want the number, and people will put it up, especially if it's first home, because they won't have had any pictures. It will go up. It will be one of those, it's like a coffee table piece. People will talk about it. Now, the feedback I've heard from that is out of control good, and that's over 15 plus years. I've heard magnificent things. So because it's just a little bit out of the box. Now I've seen all sorts of things. People buy them. One broker I've got insisted upon buying people a door knocker, which doesn't work these days. A lot of people have doors where you can't use door knockers. Another guy used to get a house number for the letterbox. I thought, well, that's not always appropriate because people don't always have a letterbox that you can stick the house number on. There's so many different things that can apply. One guy actually had a real clever idea, and he had this thing that was attached to the guttering. It was a permanent kind of thing with your house number and your address. So when emergency services, if they had to look for your home, and they've all got a large light on the truck or in the vehicle or whatever, they'd see those homes. And I appreciated that. As I was in the fire brigade for 7 years, New South Wales Fire Brigade for 7 years, the police force for a number of years. I drove those vehicles. I appreciated that. I said, that is actually really clever.
The young kids going around, actually, teenagers actually made a business out of going up and down the street and offering to paint that on the curb.
This was a particular acrylic that would never ever go. Yeah. It would just stay on forever, and it would glow. So as soon as you stuck a light on it, you'd see it from a mile away. There are a whole bunch of different things that people have done, and none of them are bad. There's no such thing as a bad settlement gift. There's only such thing as no settlement gift, and a gift doesn't have to be provided. And we're doing this out of the goodness of our heart because that's what's required out of it's. You've taken this journey together, and many times you're guiding people through the most significant purchase they've ever made in their life, and a broker has become a big part of that. You're playing a big role in the lives of some of these people, and it's a nice way to finish it off. It's in no way required, but for our clients and certainly for our people and our platinum people, obviously, it is absolutely essential. It is 100% essential. There's absolutely no excuse for not providing it. And there are cases where specific people might require something different. I was involved in a property myself where a guy got me an aeroplane, a little wooden aeroplane on a stand, and he had it. There was an aeroplane I flew. I mentioned the Flying Doctors before. He had the registration of one of the aircraft I flew. I thought, okay, that's really nice. That means something. It actually, he actually thought about it, and I thought that's actually quite incredible that he went to that trouble.
And it is that you can see they went through that trouble, but that personalisation, they've thought about it, they've made it personal, and that actually makes it very much appreciated. It's not just a standard thing that's just thrown across as a thank you very quickly. There was thought in it.
Means much more. Yeah, it pulls on those little heartstrings, doesn't it? Which kind of comes to my next point, and that is we do this, right, for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which is reciprocity. That is where is that battery going? You're always looking at that. You're making me nervous.
Well, because this was a podcast with a battery.
Yeah, but these are freshly charged. They're freshly charged, and you can take them back to your house and put them in the recycling machine, and the charges, discharges, and they turn into brand new batteries again. I was saying that the reciprocity applies. We talked about this in the manual. I don't know if we talked about it last night when we recorded the guff of this video, but certainly because we're now in the first 100 days. From settlement is the first 100 days where we're developing this person into something. Ideally, we're developing them into passionate advocates and referrers. I did hear a long time ago, someone said, the best time to ask for a referral is before you've actually done anything. So in the very first meeting you've had with the client, because you haven't pissed them off yet. Did I tell you this story?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, he's one of the guys in our rescue package, the Andrews something or other. That's such a bad attitude. Like, He didn't say that because we haven't pissed them off yet. He actually said because they're most excited and enthusiastic and passionate at that point. But that's deceit. What you need to do is demonstrate your expertise, and you can provide such a level of service that you don't have to actually ask them for a referral. You don't have to send them to your website, which has that referral page where they can enter a few names and details and everything else. You don't have to give them a couple of movie tickets because they will just give them to you. Right? If they have an exceptional experience, they'll talk about it. People talk about exceptional things. They talk about amazing experiences. And if you provide that, they will talk about it. Now,
especially if it was a difficult loan or they've been turned down before and you've pushed it over the line, they become a lot more appreciative of that, and they really know you've gone out of your way to help.
Most of the time, yeah. Yeah, there are those occasions where people are just never happy.
Of course.
And yeah, I'm just thinking to the
general customer service.
Yeah, I guess so. But the one thing we started doing about 15 years ago now was, back in the day, it's actually not nearly as easy to get swag from banks. We had at one point in this office here, we probably had 1,000 CommBank money boxes and 2,000 St. George green money boxes, and we had the red ones as well and the yellow ones. We had some multicolored ones. They weren't all green. Hundreds of pens. Every pen we use in this office is a St. George pen. I've got Bankwest, I think, stress balls just everywhere. Anyway, all these little bits and pieces and everything else. And brokers should have one room of their office facility, or if they're working from home, just one room of their house that's full of bank swag, right? Because you never know when you're going to need it. We've got big fluffy toys as well. Fluffy toys from banks. A couple of those. Have you seen those? No, they're not. They're not.
Kids must have kidnapped them.
They are. They're upstairs. They're all upstairs. So they've got this family of St. George fluffy toys, which are this big. Like, they're very big. That's St. George Dragon fluffy toys, and there's another couple. There's what's a gobbledock or something. There's some CommBank thing. I don't remember what it was, but some kids program, and they've got all these fluffy toys. There's got to be 20 of them. These little fluffy CommBank things that used to be tailored towards kids, which, again, no longer really exists. And certainly the Royal Commission almost put an end to things like those money bites programs and things like that, because the bank was almost evil in injecting themselves. And Mike, I went to a CommBank thing a couple of years ago at my kids' school, where they were talking about, putting money in every single week and whatever else. I thought, gee, that's kind of evil, because you're sucking kids into a program like that only so they'll become loyal when they're older. I thought, it's just a bit funny.
It's teaching kids to save.
Well, that's the reason I bank primarily with CommBank, is because I had an account with CommBank when I was 6, a little passbook, a little blue passbook in a little green thing with a little clip, and you pull the thing out, and you had all your little stamps in it and stuff. And that just developed and evolved into where I am now. So that's my primary account, I guess. There are other accounts I've got elsewhere for different reasons, and I don't like having multiple accounts because that's just wasteful and ridiculous, and all of your money should be in offsets anyhow, and all that sort of stuff applies, I know, but that's an account I still have, and an account I still use, and an account people still pay money into. That is the reason our business account is a CommBank account, because I always had that connection with CommBank. So you can understand why they do it. It worked with me. It works with a lot of people, but it's evil and manipulative. But we don't expect more from banks, do we? So anyway, the point is, I've got all this guff and swag and everything else. What I started to encourage, again, it was about 15 years ago, was when you settle, if it's a young couple and they've got kids, particularly if they're like 4, 5, 6 years old, no older, really, maybe no younger. Younger kids, fluffy toys, older kids, sort of money boxes and things, but or both. But what I'd have them do is put some gold coins into a money box for each of those kids and send them without warning. So this isn't a settlement gift. It's not anything else. It's just because you're thankful that you've been able to assist that family and place them in a home. And I'll tell you what, when you give a gift to kids, You bypass the parents because, mum and dad don't need anything. They've got everything they need. They've just bought a house. They're cashed up. They're good. Well, they're probably not cashed up, but they're good. But it's the kids that are probably struggling maybe with a move, or they're the ones that we should be sort of share. We should share ourselves. Oh, I'm not making sense, but we should apply our efforts to keeping the kids happy. And if you keep the kids happy, that will keep the parents exceptionally happy. And once again, not unlike the State Library of New South Wales picture or whatever it is that has a permanent fixture or place in the house, if you do that, the parents will be 100 times more appreciative. Right? It really is something that the parents appreciate, and we should do it because the parents appreciate it and because the kids will love it. And a little handwritten note about getting the kids ready for saving up for their own home or something similar. Just some, cheesy little message. It doesn't matter. You need to describe what it is you're doing and why you're providing it. That's important. Now, there are a bunch of other things that we do. I'd say, the EDGE program is very structured in a sense and very automated. Very, very automated. But it does force human behaviour. You cannot run a post-settlement program. You cannot engage in that post-settlement period, which is required for both customer service purposes. It's a vocational responsibility, and I should use a different finger than that, and because it is a big part of our the development of a referrer. So if you're going to have someone if you want to develop someone into a referrer within that first, 30 to 60 days even, the EDGE program runs over 100 days, but you've got to remember the first 3 payments are made, fortnightly. So it's a couple of months really before those 3 payments, the first 3 payments are made. And we want to develop someone really in a passionate way. We want them to have an unbridled enthusiasm for our business, and we want them to refer top-notch people. And it works, by the way. It just works. Like, we build these $100 million business, $150 million businesses without EDGE. EDGE is what gets it over the line. EDGE is what gets you putting 2 or 3 extra staff members on.
So, and it works in really nicely with the other programs we spoke about earlier in the podcast, the Saturn, the Pluto, Jupiter. All of them combined together.
Everything's an aggregate. There's no...
It's going back to traditional marketing.
It's
and
traditional...
support, which should not be forgotten, and more than often it is, and we've mentioned it more than once throughout the videos. Throughout
this program, I've probably said... I don't remember, because I don't remember last night at all. It's goddamn couch, man. But I probably said 100 times, we run the most powerful Facebook digital marketing program in the country. Right? We've been doing it forever, introduced it to this country. Our marketing funnel is a superior experience. We promise that. We guarantee it 100%. The marketing funnel experience provides more value. It's entirely personalised, and it is the only one, we'd argue, that is 100% compliant in every respect. It is a better program. It converts better. It's the only integrated digital marketing solution in the platform. However, and we are digital advocates. We build digital platforms every single day. We are building and supporting digital platforms, right? We are, digital is tattooed on our brain, right? It is. However, that doesn't mean we're going to diminish the value of traditional marketing, because it is the most powerful type of marketing you can employ within your business. And God forbid and I'm going to settle myself down because I will start screaming, it makes me sick to the core when I see people flogging off bad Facebook marketing programs like that's an answer to a problem. When you encourage someone to use a bad Facebook marketing program almost in isolation, you are doing irreparable almost damage to that business. You are not providing a service. You are introducing a cancer into that goddamn business. One of the first things we talk about in the Finance Marketing Guide is technical debt. Right? If you introduce a solution, in quotes, if you introduce a solution to a business that is crap, it is a problem. It's just another problem you have to fix. You need to introduce things the right way initially. And our platform, our digital marketing social media platform, Yabber, is the only platform that provides that in the industry. Sadly, the mortgage broking industry, this is the only industry where we see the neglect and the contempt from the marketing industry, I guess, from these charlatans and lead generation experts, in quotes. But this is the only industry where I see a contempt on this level, and a level of don't know the word, man. It's just no industry. Well, the property industry and stuff comes close. You know, there are a lot of people out there that, you know, promise all sorts of leads for different businesses. The businesses themselves should just have the capacity to generate and nurture and mature all the leads within their business and provide them into the appropriate funnels and post-settlement programs, and then post-settlement funnels for advocacy and referrals and so on. Every business has the capacity to provide that, and no business will grow until that's in place. I mentioned the other day that, you know, a business that focuses on lead generation will be paying rent. A business that focuses on building a business will own the building. You know, it's a big difference. It's a mindset. You have to alter your understanding. You have to sort of step outside of yourself and look at what you're doing, and completely and fundamentally shift your focus in gear. You have to wind your brain around a few inches or something, and, you know, give yourself a kick in the guts. And once you do that, obviously, you're positioned to take advantage of the different mechanisms that we've described throughout this podcast, and you will achieve a higher measure of success. You just will. So I don't know if we recorded an exit or anything like that on the Gravity podcast, on the last podcast we did, so we can do so now. I guess if you're interested, guys, in more information, 1300 235 433, that's 1300-BELIEF, 1300 235 433, 1300 BELIEF. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.